moving on to segment 3, and we have a looking back.
Looking back.
I love that music. This is about Piltdown Man.
Oh, Lord.
Is Piltdown Man even a thing anymore? I don't know. This is a feature written on the Free Thought Almanac WordPress page from the 20th of January 2011 by Ronald Bruce Mayer. And I'm not going to go where people may think I'm going to go with this one, with the religious fundamentalism. I'm going to leave
Go
that to
ahead.
Laura because I'm sure she will go there.
You never
Okay, so
know.
what I'm going to do as a skeptic educator is say that this is a perfect example of the fact that science sometimes gets it wrong.
Mhm.
And it's the point that needs stressing, especially to our religious friends who like to jump on science, getting it wrong as a kind of gotcha. Science sometimes does get it wrong, but on every single occasion that it does, and we realize it, it is science that makes the correction. And that's so important. So, why, in this case, did science get it wrong? Well, it was a hoax. The Piltdown Man fossil was essentially a hoax. We don't know who did it because two of the people who were still alive or were possibly involved won't say anything. The third person's unfortunately passed away before he had a chance to come clean if it was him. But essentially, they were bones that were not of an old intermediary species, and they were claimed that they were. And for some reason, due to various techniques that weren't available at the time to do the proper testing, to just taking people at the word on certain things,
Mhm.
it was just accepted that this fossil was as old as it was mentioned to be. And it was something like 42 years, 41, 42 years, I think, between the hoax being kind of perpetrated and brought to, like, the fossils being brought forward and it actually coming to light as techniques for testing and things got further on. So, what are your thoughts on it, and on the whole thing, whether it's the religious aspect of the fundamentalists going against it, or the scientific aspect? I'm really interested in hearing what you guys have got to say.
All right, I guess I'm up next. So, one thing I definitely want to reiterate that Richard said was that what corrects science is better science,
Mhm.
not, well, this is what we were saying because we have this book that told us blah blah blah. It's always okay, we were wrong about something. Well, what disproved what we originally thought? Better science, more research,
Mhm.
peer review. That's the kind of stuff that will actually give credibility to, disproving any kind of things. I definitely think it's funny that the creationists are latching onto this and, like Richard say, like, using it as like a gotcha or like a aha, see, look, evolution isn't real. And it's so funny because sure, like maybe this doesn't add to evolutionary theory, but it certainly doesn't take away from it. And it doesn't say that evolutionary theory is wrong. I can't stand well, evolution is just a theory. I am currently taking, and will take more evolution classes at the university level. And this is something they drill into our heads is don't let people say that because it's so false. And the mountain of evidence that we have towards evolutionary theory, it speaks for itself. A handful of fossils that we found out to be a hoax or whatever. Okay, we still have divergent evolution, we have convergent evolution, we have molecular biology, we have other fossil records, we have all this other kind of evidence that this is like, oh, okay, so this doesn't add to it, but it definitely does not take away from evolutionary theory. So I just thought that was really funny. And, you know, I think the best part about this is like, okay, so you're saying that for 40 years or whatever, science had it wrong. Well, where was God or your deity telling us that that was wrong? They didn't say it either. So really, science has a leg up right now because I still have not heard any deity say that the Piltdown man is a hoax. So still waiting on that. But anyway, Laura, what do you think?
I love it. I actually really, really appreciate that this is the direction that Richard took it right off the bat, because this is actually what I'm more passionate about. Because like naysayers are naysayers, and people are going to latch on to whatever they want to in order to try and get a leg up. Um, but if you really look at good argumentation, there really isn't much to be had here. So in terms of the creationist argument, like, yeah, I think we should definitely touch on that and talk about it a little bit. But I really like talking about the science part. Science is not a person or an entity or a thing. It is a process. And we can apply the scientific process in as many different ways across as many different spectrums as possible. But one of the things that's so great about it is that it is self-correcting. So when you have something that somebody proves is true, or they have a claim that they've tested and they now have facts to back up that claim, that does not stop somebody else from going in and testing that exact same claim and seeing what kind of results they get. In fact, really good scientists should be encouraging it, right? You don't want to have the claim that 20 years down the line somebody else says, well, they got it wrong, right? You want to know right off the bat so that you can fix it and go on from there. In this case, what you have is a really, really good dose of fraud and bad science. And what I thought was interesting is you do have some good scientists that are kind of wrapped up into this conspiracy, if that's what you wanna call it, right? That verified the bones. And so this doesn't just demonstrate that sometimes science gets it wrong, it demonstrates that individuals can be biased. And so at the time, there was really this push to find the missing link, and I gotta get my air quotes a little closer, missing link. And there really was a push to prove evolution in general. And so a lot of these scientists were hopeful when Piltdown Man came to fruition, and so some really bad science was done, and you didn't have people going in and re-verifying it or trying to falsify it. And I think that in general in today's world, I would hope, and I really do see it a lot more often, that you have people that want their work falsified, and you have people that want to go in and look at other people's work and see if it's good or bad, or hey, if this is earth-shattering news, let's make sure it's legit. And so I do think that this is a really good example um, that the scientific community should, and I think did, latch onto in terms of, oh shit, we have got to make sure that we are on top of our stuff.
Yeah, definitely. And the fact that it does appear to be a hoax, even though no one ever admitted it, there's pretty strong evidence against it. The actual thing that were found were a human skull,
Hmm.
or that were presented as being found, was a human skull, which was of 620 years old, with a 500-year-old orangutan jaw, uh, a second skull fragment from medieval times, a 500-year-old jawbone, which was probably from Malaysia, three teeth, one of which was an elephant molar from Tunisia,
That was
a
fun. Yeah.
hippopotamus tooth from Malta or Sicily, and a canine tooth from a Pleistocene era chimpanzee. And this is the kind of, at the time, this was all presented as evidence, and it just wasn't checked thoroughly enough. And when I think one of the most interesting things about this article for me is that, yeah, we said that science corrected itself, but it
Hmm.
wasn't just a case of all of a sudden one day somebody discovered this was a hoax. It was, uh, I did a bit of digging of the time frame of how this actually came about, and try and just remember the more hominids were discovered, which kind of filled in the missing link aspect of it. And this discovery didn't fit into the wider picture that was being framed. So kind of question marks were being raised amongst that. In 1925, which was 13 years after the discovery, the dating of the gravel was found to be wrong. It was more recent than Dawson, who was one of the scientists, claimed. And in 1947, which was 35 years after discovery, a new test for fluorine content was discovered, which has established a recent origin of the fossils. So this was really a gradual process of looking at lots of different aspects of a wider picture, which brought this to light. And I think that's what's so good about it, because it wasn't a case of somebody just discovered it and shouted hoax. It was the scientific process which corrected the
Doing
mistake.
what it was, meant to do.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, as a, prospective scientist, biologist, I actually find this really exciting because, as they say, the more mistakes you make, the more you learn from it. And so I think that this is a big, huge thing that we know not to do again. And, I like how someone pointed out that, a lot of the good scientists, they want their stuff falsified. They want to be, quote, proven wrong, because then that means that there's more to discover. I find this very exciting. It means, okay, what else is out there? What else can we go discover? What can we find? What mistakes did we make and how can we learn from it? This is definitely something that should not be latched onto as a bad thing. I mean, of course, we should be more careful in the future and make sure we're putting out the most accurate information we can. But at the same time, I mean, what does this mean for all the other stuff we could discover? I actually find it very encouraging and very I'm excited about it. It just means we have a lot more to do, and we have better techniques now that we didn't have before, and people checking each other. And I don't really see anything negative from this, other than, of course, a few bad methods and stuff. But I think we can choose to look at it as a a misstep of the scientific community, but I think we should focus more on how it can improve our techniques and our methods in the future. So yeah, I really don't see anything negative about this.
Yeah, I don't even know if I see it necessarily as a misstep of the scientific community, because the people that you're gonna have dishonest people no matter where you go, right? Like, you are gonna have rapists and pedophiles in the police department and the fire department and the military, right? Like, places where we hold people up as heroes. You're gonna have dishonest people in academia, and you're gonna have dishonest scientists. And so you certainly had, like, hoaxsters. You had people who deliberately went out and lied about their findings, and then the scientists that really made the mistakes were the ones that verified the finds, right? Like,
Right,
they
that was
trusted
more
the
what I
people.
was trying to get at. Sorry, I didn't word
Yeah,
it
yeah. No,
perfectly.
and I do appreciate that. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I do agree with you that this is a good example of science doing what it's meant to do, which is you have something you think you found, you have an explanation for it, and that explanation may stick for a little while, and then it eventually doesn't. What I think was the most profound about this is the fact that we're still talking about it, and anything other than a scientific discussion of what not to do, right? The fact that it's still newsworthy. And what I was kind of thinking is, corrections, they travel like wildfire in the scientific and academic community, right? And then they travel like snail snot through the general population. Like, sometimes those corrections
Absolutely.
don't even frickin' occur. Yeah. So this is to me, a really good example of our sort of lack of scientific literacy in the general population. The fact that we even need to still
Absolutely.
talk about this.
The fact that some people are even saying evolution is just a theory, even that just shows, not in a derogatory sense, but just, ignorance and of science. But I feel like with the internet at your fingertips and so many people talking against it, it's like, okay, well, at what point does it become willful? That's still something I'm kind of wrestling with, but yeah, I definitely agree. The scientific literacy is not where it should be.
Yeah. And it's not all, it's going to remain low in areas where people want it to remain low, where you get picked in. I don't want to bring the Texas school board into it again, but I'm going to.
Do it.
When you've got,
Go
because I
for
mention it pretty much every episode.
Just
When you've got people like that who deliberately want to twist things, and yeah, you've got people working for certain creationist organizations who are fully qualified biologists who went to school, who were funded to go to school to learn the actual science so that they could twist it and try and debunk it. This is a thing that happens in our world, in America.
yeah.
You
And
know, this shouldn't be happening. It shouldn't be happening at all anywhere.
No, I just want to put that in perspective really quick though, because a lot of people do say that. They're like, well, there's scientists that believe in this and scientists that believe in that. Like, I can go to a Bible college and I can get a degree in any Bible topic I want. And I can go to an Islamic school and get a degree in whatever Islamic topic I want. Right. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I believe everything that's being taught. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I have good or bad critical thinking skills because I got through whatever the topic was. Right. And just because you're able to be skeptical in one department doesn't necessarily mean that you're skeptical across the board. And I think that you bring up a really good point, that it's really, really important to remember that just because a person has a PhD doesn't mean they don't also have cognitive biases. But what are your guys'
Yeah.
closing thoughts on this before we move on to our last segment?
Well, I guess I'll go since Richard brought us in here. Yeah, I'm very excited about this. The only thing that beats bad science, quote unquote bad science, is better science, good science. People peer reviewing and checking up on each other. And, I don't see anything super negative about this other than we learn from our mistakes and we keep chugging forward and keep moving on. And I'm just excited for what kind of lessons we've learned from this and how that's going to impact our scientific discoveries in the future.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
that is really good.
Yeah.
I agree. I think it's a fantastic illustration, as I said at the start, of how science corrects itself, and that sometimes science does get it wrong, but it's always science that does the correcting. I have yet to know of a single case of science getting it wrong. And again, this is something August touched on earlier, and somebody coming up with a passage from the Bible or the Quran and saying, well, actually, I'd like to correct you there, and confirming it, and science saying, oh yeah, they're right, actually. We balls that
As
up.
a matter of
So,
fact.
Right.
the Quran was right all along. It's just not, it's never happened. It's very unlikely to ever happen. Regarding the Piltdown man, this is looking back, and let's look back and leave Piltdown man where it belongs, in the fucking past, because we don't need it anymore. Let's
Amen,
move
brother.
on, and